Steve, episode 43 of the Broadway block. Stanley Cup final wrapped up. Congratulations, Colorado Avalanche, knocking off the two-time defending champs, Tampa Bay Lightning. Cale Makar wins the Norris, Conn Smith, and the Cup, 23 years old. What did you like about that series? And what do you think for the Rangers going forward?
Congrats to the Avs. They're one of the best teams in the whole year. I mean, it's nice when it's not a surprise, I guess. And I know a lot of Ranger fans were probably rooting on the Bolts to lose. So for what it's worth, I mean, Cale Makar, the comparisons are probably always going to be there to our, Adam Fox. God, it would have been nice to win a Conn Smythe to go along with that Norris and a Stanley Cup on top. But listen, man, I think that was a great year. I mean, now it's fully wrapped up, right? The season's fully ended. We can kind of, I think, get away from the conversation of what would have happened if the Rangers, I think we just saw what would have happened, right? Definitely the team to model after. If you think about it, though, McKinnon was drafted almost 10 years ago. I mean, this was a long time coming as a first overall pick, and now adding to that long list of first overall picks that have gone on to eventually win the Cup. Kane, Fleury, Crosby, Ovechkin, it always ends up seeming to be. Well, here's the thing. So, Landeskog, Mika Rantanen, they had a bevy of top picks. And in addition to that, Bowen Byram and Cale Makar, we've always said this. If you can look back on half of the shows that we talk about, is that we need entry-level contracts performing at an exemplary rate, and you need those vets to be contributors.
Jack Johnson.
Yeah, exactly. Jack Johnson wins the Stanley Cup. Boy, is that crazy. So did Michael Del Zotto, though, and nobody cried about it. But the the point, I think, for what we just saw was that, McKinnon makes $6 million against the cap. That's insanity. You look at Sidney Crosby's contract when they win the Cup, 8.7. So look at the way that these contracts are modeled and moving forward. Kakko's extensions, Lafreniere's extensions, these are going to be the things that we're going to be focusing on in the future, because we do have Adam Fox wrapped up for, the next 8 years. We do have some years left on Mika, Panarin, Trouba, the core that's right there. But the real important part, Kreider as well. I think the real important part is gearing ourselves up to be like the Avalanche, where they had 2 windows. They didn't get so lucky the first time. Now that they have some youth injected into their lineup and they're performing well on those entry-level contracts, they're not even in a bad spot cap-wise. That's the crazy thing. This is going to be I don't want to say a dynasty yet. It's maybe too early to say, but this is going to be a problem team moving forward. Perennial contenders until, these contracts are, granted, McKinnon's 30 years old, but anyway, I think that this offseason is going to be pivotal. A
lot of big moves. We already see Chris Drury making moves. He re-signed Sammy Blais to a pretty cap-friendly contract, 1.5 million, which is great. There's a lot of moving pieces that are going to happen. Who you want to plug in, who you think you can get that can fit into our salary cap, because we got a lot of people that are due to get paid. So
that's the problem.
Yeah, that is the problem. Reeves still has 1.75 million. When we traded for him, we gave him an extra extension. So do we keep him or do we cut it but still have a cap hit for not having that enforcer, which even though he may not have had that many points this year, he was definitely a factor on the team, getting the locker room, Shesty, Release, always being a factor against these other teams with bigger players, being like, well, we got Reeves out there if we want to throw him out there. But 1.75 to sit behind the glass all next year when we have someone that maybe like a Tyler Mott, who we acquired via trade at the trade deadline, who in the playoffs, he looked great, killing penalties, like what we needed. So it's like, do you go with the enforcer or do you go with someone like that? Then we have the Strowman, Drew Copp situation. Now we have more invested in Andrew Copp because we lost that first round pick by advancing the Eastern Conference Finals. This year, it may not play into it as much, but we only have 4 draft picks this year starting in the second round. So it's like, do you want to lose Andrew Copp for nothing and feel the burn of still losing your first round pick? We saw how Strome was in the playoffs, obviously battling some injuries. Do we re-sign him? as Rangers fans, always based our like, well, Strome is making Panarin better, Panarin's making Strome better. Well, Panarin was a little off in the playoffs, fair to say, minus the Game 7 game winner round 1. Panarin's got a big cap hit. Who do you want to put on the line with him? So there is a lot of question marks this offseason. Obviously, Igor's got to get paid, coming back with a big Vezina to show, bring in the Brinks truck for me, everything like that. So Chris Drury's got his work.
So Igor has a couple years at 5.6, but I agree with after that, 5.6 seems a bit low. So
That's going to
let's
be
call
low.
the next 3 years the window that we're trying to shoot for. Because if we're going to talk about the same way that we talked about Colorado and the same way we talked about the Penguins, this is window 1. Window 2 opens when Fox, Lafreniere, when those guys are 26, 28, Igor's 30, and they're the vets, that would be window number 2. So if we're going to talk about window number 1 as, while Shesty's on this contract, like you said, that's due for an upgrade. I'm thinking Strome is probably a goner. Whether we trade his rights at the draft to, like you said, maybe acquire another draft pick, that maybe remains to be seen. I wouldn't say that the sting is there for Kopp. I feel like when you hear people say like you can't buy the experience that Lafreniere just got, you can't pay for that. Yeah, you can. You can pay for with a first round draft pick, and you get a lineup that can get you further in the playoffs. And maybe that's the intention. Maybe the intention was at the cost of one first round draft pick, we get to see another round, which gives them a whole bunch more experience.
Look at Hedl. He totally benefited from that extra experience. People screaming his name at the deadline. Trade him and Kravy. And then boom, showed up big time. And that good feeling walking away with those goals are going to resonate and carry over till next year. And he's going to be definitely a big center for us, which we know we're lacking on. And to develop from within is what you want to do.
Now, you just said Kravy, which kind of segued into what I was going to say about Strome walking, is that speaking of entry-level contracts, Kravy's re-signed to an entry-level contract. Does this mean that maybe he needed to be tied down to be able to be traded? That maybe remains to be seen. Again, the draft floor might be a really busy day. Do you send a Strome and a Kravtsov to try to get maybe back into that first round? Who knows? I mean, I say if it's me, you have clearly worked on the relationship with Kravtsov enough to get him to sign that contract. Now, maybe behind closed doors, I'm not going to play for the Rangers, and I'll just say that for the media. We don't really know. But if you can get some injection of Kravtsov onto that lineup, maybe slide up Kakko off of the kids line and into that spot where Strome would occupy. There's been talk that Kakko has spent a fourth of his career at center. He still has some time there. That maybe you could develop into that sort of a role. Again, Hedl showing those signs that maybe he's ready to take that next step. I think a big offseason, putting on some muscle. It's the same conversation with him every year because when he came to us, he was 170 pounds. But you see that general progression every year. So I'd love to see him make that next step. But do we fledge out that second role center for a more experienced veteran in place of Hedl? Or, the way I look at it is maybe Kopp slides over because he is a natural center who can play the wing. Most centers can. When you slide Kopp back to that middle position, maybe that opens up a spot for Kakko on the right. So your top lines would look, Lafreniere, Kreider, and Mika, or maybe we do side Vetrano. There's not a lot of money to keep everybody, right? So you talked about Mott, talked about Kopp, we talked about Vetrano. These guys might not all be signed, and I would say that you can almost be certain that only two of them, if maybe only one of them, are going to actually come back to the team. Mott's exit interview sounded pretty much like he is going to explore the open market, and he might be a Ranger. He enjoyed his time here, but it didn't sound like when Vetrano
I'm taking a hit on my cap to stay in the blue.
Yeah, I want to win a cup here. We have unfinished business to do. And from my perspective, Mott, yes, game changer, spark plug, energy type player, but we need that Frank Vetrano shoot first, laser beam shot. I'm not even thinking about passing it. You need that level of expectation in addition to the fact that he's a mean back checker. I mean, that's still sort of spark plug energy. So if he resigns, it's probably going to stay the same because I feel like there was enough chemistry there to warrant his top line position. Although he is a depth player in that he might be able to slide down that lineup and give us some depth, whether that be on the second power play or giving us an option to have a trigger man next to Panarin. So that's really what I would be looking forward to. One of the young guys sliding up to the top line, whether that be Kako, whether that be Laugh, and that second line, if we can re-sign Vetrano and Kopp with Panarin healthy, that sounds pretty good. And then we
Well, I believe also we signed Patrick Nemeth to a 3-year deal. So obviously getting him off the books, it would be great. So in my opinion, I would think pairing him with someone like a Strome in a trade, to a team like the Oilers, back to the Oilers, or someone that could use something like that, and a veteran defenseman, help get some money off the books, would be the way to go.
Yeah, but we also might be paying for this, right? Like we might, the same way that Matt Bolesky came to us as cap relief in part of a bigger trade, we might be accepting on something else to get rid of these guys. Like, pick your poison type of thing where maybe this guy needs a change of scenery and so does this guy, and we're willing to take a lemon defenseman back because we know what we have in Nemeth. Braun was a guy that if we had a $1.5 million at the end of the year and we're trying to flush out that last role, wouldn't hurt to see Braun come back, but I wouldn't say that he is necessarily on our top list. Then don't forget, we still have to talk about backup goalie situation. What happens with Alexander
Georgiev? He's been sitting back there for years now, waiting for his opportunity.
Calvert.
Tell me he wouldn't fit in the Oilers better than Mike Smith or Koskinen, who Koskinen signed with I think KHL or somewhere like that.
Yeah, and if you're the Colorado Avalanche, I mean, you just won a cup with Francois and Darcy Kemper. So
which was an upgrade. Remember, that was the reason they lost in the second round last year with Grubauer.
And think about when Grubauer went to the Kraken, how everybody was like up in arms. I mean, it's like, listen, like
he sucked all year. He didn't do shit.
It was also the backup to the Capitals. I mean, we've seen, it's not like, when a guy becomes a starter, everybody forgets all the times where we watched him give up 5 goals. He's not a great goalie. But what I would say, and goalies also do mature later in their careers, and there's always a chance when you pick up somebody who's 25, 26 that maybe they are ready for that next role. And I've always been a proponent of Georgiev needing more time. When he was the starter for us, he wasn't bad. When he was the backup for us, he wasn't good. Let's put it that way. So if he had some time to sort of if you're the Oilers and you're looking at the way that the Colorado Avalanche just won without spending money on that goalie, and maybe you can put more effort into that. I mean, they're already a top heavy team, but there are teams that play that game of being top heavy and spending $2 million on goalie and just kind of letting it rock.
They might let Stuart Skinner come up. They didn't give him many chances this year, but
listen, man, you better believe there's going to be some teams that are looking at that goalie situation and thinking, man, Alexander Georgiev is not only a better starter than he is a backup, but they just won with a backup. So that's all I think in the Georgiev situation. I think there's more market for him now, which thank God, because if you look back on the way that the Tony DeAngelo situation went down and the whole like defamation of his trade value, and the same way with Georgiev, and like his numbers started to drop, and it was like at a point we were thinking maybe a first for Tony and Georgiev, and then at best we're looking at like a 4th, 5th round pick for Georgiev. I want to say that the market's better. Who knows? Maybe we just have him walk if there's no trade there, because again, knowing that some of these guys are going to be on expiring contracts, teams might be willing to be patient and try to sign this guy to a UFA contract. So if I'm a gambling man, I would say that Georgiev is no longer a Ranger. I would say that Ryan Strome is no longer a Ranger, and I'm going to go ahead and say Tyler Mott. Although, brother man,
I'll ask you this one:
what a guy.
Who's the unexpected person that you don't believe to be a Ranger next year?
Like something
you wouldn't see coming, like out of the ball field, out of the left park. Like who's that? I got my guy.
I don't think I have one. I don't think anything crazy happens. I think that maybe the most shocking would be like Reeves or somebody, because like I don't see much room to get rid of. I feel like we're we're just gonna fledge out what we have, maybe Truba. I mean, but he has a no move. Not that you can't move a no move contract, but who's yours?
I was gonna say Reeves too. Like, yeah, he was a big staple of the team this year, but it's a big cap hit when you're strapped to get these bottom wingers and what you need for the team.
Listen,
Plus,
he's undeniable. It's undeniable what he did for our club. We're a tougher team to play against. I mean, he didn't have to fight people. That alone should tell you what he did for the franchise. I mean, people went into playing the Rangers knowing that it's a tough night and you can't cheat. You can't push these dudes around. You're gonna get beat up, and they're probably gonna outscore us too. I mean, we were a threat moving into the season, and I think a lot of that opening.
you don't need that grit as much in the playoffs, like you're not trying to get those penalty minutes, so you're not fighting as much in the playoffs. So you definitely saw the Reeves projection that we had all season go down because he's not scoring points. Obviously, he's a hitting machine. There was a point he was leading the league in hits. So
well, you need grit, but you don't need to take stupid penalties.
Correct.
And if you look at Colorado, the way that they got into hot water and taking the too many men penalty, I mean, like, that is a penalty you just don't take. I mean, they almost got it twice in 2 games. And you think about undisciplined penalties almost costing you the cup. I mean, yeah, you can't have Reeves going out there and running somebody into the boards and getting a meaningless penalty. But I want to say that as a coaching role, I don't know how Reeves is feeling and how much tread he feels like he has back on his tires. But
I think he could be like a part-time player, maybe not with us, maybe somewhere else.
He is an absolute glue guy. I mean, you look at Pat
Full
Maroon,
team member.
As much as we talk crap about the guys like Pat Maroon, you need those dudes to give a calm presence in the locker room and not only the calmness, the giddiness and the this is a game, man. Like, let's go out and play. That's what you need. And I feel like Reeves is one of those dudes that not only supplies the locker room with a little bit of buzz, but also that calming vet energy. I wouldn't mind seeing him move to a coaching role. This might not be the season that he does it. Let's say he plays out this season. I'd be happy to see Reeves moving into a who do we have player development? I can't think. Tanner Glass.
Somebody like that. No, I think Tanner Glass is Europe.
So it's like we need that piece, and I think Reeves is that guy. Like what do we represent? What do we
that's like Jason Spezza for the young GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's like it's literally a Dwight Schrute role. He's like assistant to the GM, but like he's the guy. Like, all right, he made this play, he made this pass by the blue line, like this, that, and the other.
I feel like we're in a great spot regardless. I feel like this was there's so much negativity. So yeah, absolutely. There's so much negativity surrounding the season about what could have been, and I feel like moving into the season, my expectations were make the playoffs. Right around playoffs time, I had tweeted out that my predictions were as follows: that we were going to win a round, Chesty was going to have unreal numbers, the kids were going to come alive, and that eventually we would meet our match. And I got more than that. We won 2 series. Chesty did have unreal numbers. The vets were fucking amazing. Mika scored more goals than Adam fucking Graves. I mean, listen, this year was great by every stretch of imagination. I mean, top 10 Rangers season of all time. There's no point of even, but
finishing second in points, like with the season, first year head coach, like there was just so many great storylines all season long.
100%. So many individual accolades, and don't forget we're coming off the back of a Norris Trophy season into a Vezina Trophy season.
Trophy.
Defense,
like the writing's there on the wall for like how you build a cup. Like what you were saying at the beginning of the thing, like Colorado got struck down in the second round, but they kept plugging in pieces till it worked. And that's what I think we're a little bit ahead of where the Colorado was plugging in pieces, because obviously we have a Vezina Trophy winner back there, which is just great, and a Norris Trophy winner back in Adam Fox. So it's just plugging in a couple vets here and there, some more experience, and just getting those young guys more and more experience. It's like, as they get better, we are going to get better as a team.
Oh, yeah. Keandre Miller. We didn't say his name. I just feel like it's worth mentioning. I mean, like, we found out what we have in Keandre Miller. This playoff was full of so much knowledge, I feel like, for us, that moving forward, it's really going to be about who those guys are for us moving forward. And, Fox, Miller, Laugh, Kako, Igor, that's the core. Those are the
What
pieces that
about,
aren't.
who had a quiet playoffs that like wasn't mentioned enough? And then we'll wrap this up, but Brendan Schneider.
Brady Snyder. Yeah,
Braden
100%.
Schneider.
And
Like,
you
no
look
one
at
was talking about him, but he was making plays. Yeah, he had a couple
that's
mistakes,
funny.
but he's just a rookie out there and playing against
That's
the
funny.
best in the NHL.
I kind of forgot that he was a rookie a little bit. And the other thing is that you hear JD talk about Schneider when they moved up in the draft to get him. They talked about everyone in the playoffs had a guy like Schneider, and I think it kind of maybe goes to your sentiment about it wasn't talked about because it's like
We had
you forget
Keandre Miller over there,
every
like having
team's
a
got one.
playoffs. Like
Yeah, and Schneider definitely played that hard nosed role for us. And
he looked
again,
better than Braun out there.
okay, so there was definitely times where there was some insufficiencies, but we're talking about. I mean, I can't think of
Playing
one
the
that led
best
to
in
a
the
goal.
world at their
Right.
top time. Like,
Right. And I think as far as like having, not that I want to see him go, but you need to have trade value. And if there's a move that we can make and there's a decision that needs to be made, and the difference is having a blue chip prospect to say, fine. I think that that's why we're in a good position. I think that that's why I don't care about losing out on that first round pick, because a
we
little
got
bit
a
of the
lot in
next
the
5 years
pipeline.
are gonna be.
Hoffman, we got a lot out there.
Well, free agency is going to be weird because I think it's one of the unique times as a Rangers fan where we won't be very active in free agents. We likely won't get the biggest fish, and that's fine. And I think that maybe going towards the deadline, that's when we start to see similar moves like we did now, plugging in pieces. And once you get to the end of the year where you can acquire only, an eighth of someone's contract and pay them for the rest of the season, I think that we'll look to fledge out the lineup again. I hate to kind of go down the road of continuously using the deadline to try to get that one last little extra piece, but something tells me that we're moving into that.
I agree with you though, because we're running off this momentum of a great season. So we're gonna see, are those people gonna show up like, week one of the start of the NHL season? Or are they
Right.
gonna putter out? Like, Kreider was playing, he just got wrist surgery. Like, is he gonna still be Mr. 50 goals next year? Obviously he's locked up and tied to us, but there's tons of those storylines all over. We will see. Like, does Laugh's growth keep climbing? Like, what do we need to get? What do we have? And I think it will be great for a fresh start. Igor's already established behind the net, like as the best goalie in the league. Like, Adam Fox, like we're just gonna see those pieces and we're gonna know what we have. And so I think you are 100% right. Like, I hate to say wait for the trade deadline and see what's available. And I also agree with you on I don't think we're going to be very active. I've only heard a couple names mentioned in free agents like Trocheck, Dubois. No one.
But Trocheck's an interesting option because people forget that. I mean, nobody who played fantasy league in our league forgets. Trocheck was ranked 7th in fantasy. Our league counted hits. This guy puts up offensive numbers and beats the shit out of you. He's a spark plug. He's an energy player. Maybe reunite
And he's
him
a
with Frank
shooter. He
Vatrano.
shoots.
Yeah, and imagine Vatrano, Trocheck, Panarin. Fuck. The other thing is, if we don't get better for next season, what does that mean? Do we think we have enough? Like, that's really where I'm curious is how does Drury feel about this? How does upper management feel about what happened? Because, you can say
You don't
what you
want to
want
come down like 2015.
well, right. You can say what you want about Panarin and the lackluster performance, but I mean, were we really just banking on him being like a point per game, a more than point per game play? Like, what is the interpretation of was that what we ought to have done? Like, making that Eastern Conference final was clearly in his head, because you got to think about how razor thin of thinking that has to be. That I bet you, if we have Andrew Kopp, that may be just good enough to get us to the Eastern Conference Finals. That is a very incredible bet to make, and I think that shows us what kind of a pulse that Drury has on this team, because I feel like it reminds me of the same trades that when Jeff Gordon made the conditional picks with Matt Zuccarello. If the Dallas Stars advance to the conference final, what happened the next season? The Dallas Stars advanced to the conference final. The same stipulations were that if the Tampa Bay Lightning were to win the cup for the next 2 seasons, we get a first round pick. What happened 2 seasons following that? The Lightning won the Stanley Cup 2 times. So it does show you that when these GMs make these trades, that each one of us knows exactly where we're at in
What you're getting, where you're going, and
100%. And
what it's going to take to get there.
I feel like when I talk about, Chris Drury's decision making, that's what I'm looking at it as a lens of, this dude seems to have a pulse on the team of what we need. And if we don't make any moves, I think that goes to show you that he's confident in the hand that he has. So let's go Rangers.
Let's go Rangers. Thanks for your time today, Steve.
Take care, brother.
Have a great one.